Hey everyone, this is Dr. Ruscio. Let's discuss the question, does being a weekend warrior work? Will you obtain the health benefits from exercise if you only condense your exercise to 1 or 2 days? And the answer to this question, thankfully, is yes, but there's an important caveat. There's a threshold that you have to hit in order to reap all of these benefits from exercise. So let's break down what the benefits are and then what these thresholds you should hit are, and a few simple protocols and devices you can use to make sure that you're going to hit the mark, get the threshold, and therefore all of the benefits from exercise. Okay, so let's start off with some physiology. No surprise that exercise can benefit multiple systems of the body. Part of the reason for this is that exercise is a hermetic or a healthy stressor, a stressor that our body needs in order to be healthy. Just like you need tension or gravity on bone for your bones to be healthy and dense and not fracture, you need exercise for multiple systems of your body. There's a number of adaptations that ensue when you exercise, in part due to this flood of biomolecules you obtain that researchers are terming collectively as exerkines. And the first I'd like to detail with you is cardiovascular. No surprise, when you exercise, you have better cardiovascular function, which includes a decreased risk of stroke and of heart disease. And there's this increased need for oxygen when you exercise. So your heart pumps faster and harder, and your respiration increases. So the heart and the lungs become stronger. In addition to this, VO2 max also improves. And this is short for volume of oxygen consumed. Why this is beneficial is it tells us how much oxygen your body can pull out of the blood. And if you think about it, you need oxygen for healthy muscle function, for healthy skin, especially for neurological function. In fact, if you've heard of hyperbaric oxygen, which is pretty effective for brain injury, this is just oxygen at a higher concentration under pressure, which helps get more of that oxygen to your brain and allows healing. So in a way, you get similar benefits when you exercise with having a heightened ability to pull oxygen out of your blood. Now, another thing here that I think is really important to keep in mind is at the cellular level, you actually have improved what's known as mitochondrial density. So these little components inside your cells, the mitochondria that make energy for every cell in your body, you have an increased number of them and a better function of them. So literally every cell in your body will have more energy. And then another thing that ties in with the hyperbaric oxygen example is angiogenesis, the formation of new blood vessels. And this is part of the reason why exercise improves things like cognition, is because of this angiogenesis. You get more blood vessels delivering blood to the brain and nutrients. Therefore, you see improvements in cognition. In fact, endurance athletes have been shown to have a 17% better blood velocity in the brain than those who are sedentary. And there's this other exerkine known as brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which you can also stimulate with things like sauna. Some researchers have nicknamed this Miracle Grow for the brain because it leads to increased brain volume and number of neurons in the brain. And this is especially relevant and especially occurs in the hippocampus, which is this center of the brain that's very important in governing learning and memory. And it tends to degrade and neurodegenerate and become smaller in things like Alzheimer's disease. And this is why collectively, with people who exercise, we see anywhere from a 15 to a 20% reduction in Alzheimer's and dementia risk. And probably pretty obvious, but worth just touching on quickly, skeletal muscle. Body composition is one of the things that we're after here, and exercise will increase muscle mass and muscle strength. This is important as you age because there is an age-associated natural decline in muscle mass. We become less anabolic, less able to be built up as we age. So we can preempt that with exercise. And this is where I think resistance training has some special and specific merit. And also remember that with improved muscle mass, you will have this sort of glucose sink that drinks up glucose and helps with blood sugar regulation. And just one more time to reiterate that when you do exercise, your muscles, quite in particular, will have an improvement in their mitochondrial density. And this has a spillover effect. And it's probably one of the main mechanisms through which those who exercise have better energy. And bone health, again, where I think any exercise, but especially resistance exercise, I think has this nice merit. This is because the tension and pressure from exercise stimulates osteoblasts. These are the builders of bone, and this reduces osteoporosis. And also as it pertains to healthy aging, one of the theories of falling and breaking the hip is actually that you first break the hip and then you fall. And this is probably why we see that at least some data is showing that in postmenopausal women, the cohort that's most at risk for osteoporosis, a 24% reduction in osteoporosis in postmenopausal women who exercise. And then the final benefit I wanted to just tie in here was immune. Exercise will lead to short-term pro-inflammatory changes by increasing a cytokine known as interleukin-6, but long-term will actually decrease inflammation and lead to a lowering of interleukin-6. And this is sort of one of the commonalities we see with hormetic stressors. There's a short-term noxious stimulus that then leads to a longer-term healthy adaptation. Inflammation, oxidation, short-term, and then less inflammation and better antioxidant status long-term. And this is part of the reason why we see a 10 to 20% reduction in cancer risk in those who are exercising. And this all sort of summates to the longevity benefit. And we've made a slide, and I hope you enjoy this slide as much as I do. But longevity can be measured via a metric known as all-cause mortality. This means death from any cause. So it would include stroke, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, neurodegenerative decline like Alzheimer's or dementia. And what we've put on this graph, and I'll do my best to narrate for those who are only listening, on the vertical axis, you have your physical fitness. On the horizontal axis, you have your age. And the key concept here that we're trying to highlight with this green dotted line is to delineate there's a difference between the length of your life and the health span of your life. If you live to 100, but you spend your last 20 years in a nursing home and you can't play with your grandkids due to physical limitations, or you don't remember your grandkids, and in fact, this is something I myself witnessed with 3 of my grandparents, heartbreaking. They spent many, many years in an assisted living facility because they weren't able to take care of themselves. So it's this window of morbidity that we're trying to compress as much as we can. Now, with that in mind, a fit person will have a natural age-associated decline in their level of fitness, but they will have a compressed decline at the end of their life where maybe only 2 years or so are morbid, where they have a hard time taking care of themselves, hopefully even less. And by the way, this is a table that we've adopted from Strasser and colleagues from the Journal of Bioscience, and I just really appreciate this graphic. Now, if you're sedentary, you're going to start with a lower baseline level of fitness that's going to have a natural age decline, but you'll have a much longer window of morbidity, of dysfunction, of not being able to remember things or people or being able to function and move. And if you're someone who starts exercising, even if you're sedentary and then later in your life you start exercising, what you will do is you will push back and compress that window of time that you're dysfunctional. And this is one of, I think, the most important long-term benefits of exercise is, sure, in the here and now, we want to look good, we want to feel good, we want to perform well. Yes. But we also want to reduce the amount of years later in life that we're unhealthy, dysfunctional, we can't take care of ourselves, we can't remember who our loved ones are. And this is what I'm hoping this visual helps you to see. You can notably decrease that end of life dysfunctional period if you're exercising. Doesn't matter if you're sedentary. If you start exercising, you can still compress that window. Okay, so then coming to weekend warrior. This is defined as someone who consolidates and compresses their activity to 1 to 2 days per week. It doesn't have to be on the weekends. It's just that consolidation to 1 to 2 days per week of exercise in a week's period. And thankfully, we have some pretty impressive data to answer this question, so that the level of confidence with what I'm sharing with you is high from a research perspective. A meta-analysis of 4 studies looking at nearly 500,000 individuals. And here is what they found. Regular exercise leads to a reduction by 18% in all-cause mortality. That's death from any cause. Weekend warriors have a 17% reduction. So it's actually pretty similar between those who are regular exercisers as compared to those who are weekend warriors. And just for context, if you're not exercising, your risk of all-cause mortality goes up by 21%. If you're smoking, especially heavy smoking, your risk of death from any cause goes up to 99%. If you're a heavy alcohol consumer, you have an increased all-cause mortality of 31%, and if you're overweight, 5%. Hopefully this motivates you to exercise and I guess be okay with even if you're only getting in 1 or 2 days of exercise per week. And I've said before, any exercise is better than none. In this meta-analysis, they did control for confounders. This is known as the healthy user bias, meaning perhaps people who exercise are also eating healthier, minding their sleep, not smoking, and maybe those who don't exercise don't care about their sleep or eating unhealthy food or exercising or drinking. It's important to control for these. So you can perform a meta-regression or regression analysis to tease out those variables and control or isolate only for the impact of exercise. And when we do that, we see the data that I shared with you a moment ago. You still see a clear benefit from exercise, even when controlling for confounders. But now we come to the threshold. And this is what I thought was most insightful and also most constructive. Okay, so this breaks down by intensity. Moderate versus vigorous. If you're doing moderate intensity exercise, you need 150 minutes or more per week to reap these health benefits. If you're doing vigorous, higher intensity exercise, you need a little bit less, 75 minutes or more per week to obtain these benefits. Now, how do we define this? Well, there's 2 ways. We can calculate or we can estimate. Estimations, meaning if you're engaging in any of the following activities, these are considered moderate intensity. Brisk walking, biking, swimming, hiking, or light jogging, or as Ron Burgundy would say, jogging. And the vigorous exercises or intensity would be running, jumping rope, cycling, HIIT or high intensity interval training, or hiking uphill. Now, if you're a real numbers person, you can look at your heart rate to determine what level of intensity you're operating in. To be moderate, you need to hit 64 to 76% of your max heart rate. I'll come to some guidelines on that in a moment. And if you're targeting vigorous, that's 77 to 93% of your max heart rate. And the way you calculate this is twofold. You can do an estimate of your max heart rate. This is the formula you may have heard of before, 220 minus your age. And that gives you your max heart rate. You can also calculate your individual max heart rate. And this is where you do a max heart rate test, something like a 12-minute run. It's known as a Cooper's run, or a 2K row. And once you determine what your maximum heart rate is, the maximum you can achieve, then you multiply that by the intensity. So as this example denotes, if you could hit 170, then you can times that by 0.7 to get your target heart rate of 119 beats per minute. What can be helpful about personalizing your max heart rate is it allows you to offset to your fitness level. And especially if you're newer to exercising, then it's possible that the estimated targets might be high. This is something I appreciate about the interview we had with Dr. Mike T. Nelson recently. He said, until proven otherwise, whatever you can max your heart rate out at is your max heart rate. And I'll say, as I've been experimenting with this only for a few weeks, I've topped out at 174. I'm pretty confident I can get to 180 or 185. But just to put it out there, it's not always quite as easy to hit that, age estimated. So for me, it'd be about 181. It's not always so easy to hit that. And especially if you're not fit, then this may allow you to kind of personalize the level of exertion that you're striving for. Then there are a few devices that can help you with tracking if you wanted to just have a wearable that could allow you to hone in on some of this. What I use is this polar strap, the chest strap, and it links up to my Garmin watch. And these chest straps are probably the most accurate. They're not very expensive. You can use a Fitbit, you can use an Apple Watch, you can use a Garmin watch with or without the chest strap. These have pros and cons. They have different price points. Anything here should get you into a decent ballpark, but remember the chest strap is the most accurate. I would also say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't trip yourself up on all the superfluous details and just try to get yourself moving and do the best that you reasonably can with some of these details. I wanted to touch on strength training because as we were looking into this, we also found a 2022 meta-analysis. They found that 40 minutes of strength training per week led to a 17% reduction in all-cause mortality, similar to what we just outlined with some of the aerobic training. But if you combined strength training with aerobic training, it led to a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality. So it seems to be best to combine strength with cardio. Now, this study didn't come to a conclusion in terms of how many days per week, how long, so it may not matter. The important principle may be get in strength and endurance or aerobic training each week, and that's probably the best. The exact parameters for how long, how frequent don't seem to matter in this case. The other question I wanted to answer for you is, are there certain cases, certain conditions that may want to exercise more frequently? And there was a very impressive umbrella review. This is a review that reviews the meta-analyses. So it's a really comprehensive sort of purview of the literature. And they found that those with depression seem to need to exercise more frequently. They found it was the most effective when people with depression who are trying to improve their depression exercised 4 to 5 days per week for 30 to 60 minutes at a moderate to high intensity. Now, this might be because people with depression need two things: more frequent anti-inflammatory exercise stimulus and more frequent bouts to improve circulation to the brain. That's my speculation. I think it's reasonable, but do with that what you will. And then regarding injury, there wasn't really any good information to help answer, is there a higher prevalence of injury in weekend warriors versus those who are more consistently exercising during the week? What I would offer you is a little bit of practicality. If you want to do something that's ballistic, playing football, soccer, things where there's lots of changes of direction or sprinting, then I would ease into those, because the more ballistic the movement, or even heavy weight training, so the more intense, the more ballistic, the more likely injury will occur. And another thing I appreciate about Dr. Mike Nelson's appearances on the podcast in the past is he has found that it's spikes in load that tend to propagate injury. So that would mean just work your way up to these things rather than jumping right in. And then to sort of recap this for you, here is what this breaks down to. Regarding aerobic exercise, 150 minutes or more per week of moderate intensity. If you're doing vigorous, higher intensity exercise, you need a little bit less, 75 minutes or more per week to obtain these benefits. And ideally, this is either one of these will be combined with 40 minutes of strength training per week. Also, Normal caveats apply. I don't know what conditions or syndromes you may be dealing with, so always check this with your doctor or healthcare provider. If this has been helpful, please comment, like, or share. This helps us reach more people and share with them important information for how they can optimize their health.